We are so happy you're here. This is episode 3 of Tinkercad Teachers. This is a webinar series exclusively for teachers, but we also like to be inclusive, so if you're not a teacher, it's great that you're here as well. This is a series that is brought to you by the software company Autodesk, which empowers its users to make anything. We are super excited now to get started to talk about the topic of making learning more accessible with Tinkercad. So who are we? Who is this person talking? My name is Kellyanne Mahoney, and I am a youth program specialist at Autodesk. Before I joined Autodesk in July, I actually spent 13 years teaching as a classroom teacher in the Boston Public Schools. I do hold a very fancy master's degree in education. And one thing that I wanted to announce to you today is we have a new email address for Tinkercad Teachers. You can see it underneath my photo. It's tinkercadteachers@autodesk.com. So if you have any questions, particularly about this webinar or maybe some of the earlier webinars, you'll be able to reach us there. We have the Tinkercad Help Desk and the Tinkercad Forum for more general questions, but if you have questions specifically about the Tinkercad Teachers webinar series, we'd love to hear from you, or even just comments or ideas for future episodes. Another exciting new element that we've added to our bios today is our team here has decided that we should also share a superpower. So I'm going to begin sharing my superpower, and I think that my superpower is bringing people together. I love meeting people and listening to people and hearing their ideas, and then bringing people together that might share similar interests, but maybe are coming from different perspectives. And I hope that that is evident today in this webinar. So next we have Mare. Before Mare introduces herself, I just wanted to thank Mare for hosting us here at the beautiful Earl Center for Learning and Innovation at Wheelock College. So Mare has been a lovely host to us, and we are so happy to be here in her space. So
I'm very happy you're here too, and it's a wonderful space. So I've been directing the Earl Center for about 4.5 years since it was built. And I'm a librarian a librarian and a bunch of other things by trade, but I got into innovation when I came here, and I've also been a disabled library activist with 35 years of experience, because I've been working through those 35 years to help libraries continue to be accessible for people with disabilities. I have one myself, so it's like the hair club for men. And my superpower is I was recently termed a compassionate disruptor, which is going on my business card. I really like that. So.
Super cool. And next we have Rhianon.
Hi, my name is Rhianon Gutierrez. I am currently a digital learning specialist in the Boston Public Schools in the technology department. I have a master's in education technology and a certificate in assistive technology. You can tweet me at Rhianon. I'm here today because I'm a person who has been hard of hearing or deaf for most of my life. So my superpower has always been that I'm a lip reader. I can read your lips from about 8 to 20 feet away. So be careful.
Next we have Shar.
Hi, my name is Charlotte. I'm the technology teacher at the Horace School for the Deaf here in Boston. We're also a Boston public school. My background is in educational technology, and my superpower is that I can hear with my eyes. And pictured there is my first 3D printed object.
So Shar wins for the bio picture. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely.
You made a valiant effort. And next is Rich.
Thanks, Kellyanne. My name is Rich. I'm the Innovation Coordinator at Brookwood School in Manchester by the Sea, Massachusetts. Additionally, I'm a national faculty member for the Buck Institute for Education. We teach teachers how to do project-based learning. I am the PBS Digital Innovator for 2017 for Massachusetts. Formerly, I was the Education Coordinator for a group called Enable and the Enable Community Foundation, which I will tell you more about later. And my superpower is problem finding with students and helping students find problems to solve in their lives.
Problem finding, I love it. All right, moving on. So just really quickly, you might be here because you're a teacher who's interested in the topic of accessibility. Or you might just be a geeky teacher like myself, and you're just interested in learning something new, and maybe you don't have any background in Tinkercad whatsoever. So I just wanted to show you this quick clip that I think demonstrates pretty clearly what you can do with Tinkercad. Basically with Tinkercad, if you have an idea in your mind, you can bring it to reality in minutes, just like this. So when you open up Tinkercad, Tinkercad is a free web-based tool that basically a lot of the commands and functions that you see happening here are very similar to like if you were to change the size of a picture, for example, in a PowerPoint presentation. It's really that simple. You're just dragging simple shapes onto a work plane and then making them more complex. So taking a cube and then adding a cylinder and then maybe getting super fancy and turning your shapes into holes to subtract from them and make them more intricate. And then once you're done, you can export your design as an STL file and send it to the 3D printer to print. So that's how simple Tinkercad is, and you'll see more examples of that later on. What are we going to learn today? We're going to learn a lot of things today, and I'm really excited about it. First off, we're going to be talking about the relationship between universal design for learning, universal design, which was actually the precursor to universal design for learning, and assistive technology. We're also going to learn about design thinking and its application to designs by, with, and for students with disabilities. If you're someone coming from the education community, you're probably very familiar with inhabiting the land of acronyms. We use a lot of acronyms in education because we talk about a lot of complex, wordy things and we like to shorten it down. But the one thing that I really like about the acronym SWDs is that it really makes you think about how when you're talking about students with disabilities or people with disabilities or athletes with disabilities, you put the WD last because you speak about the person first. So that's just a nice thing that I've learned through this process. Another thing that we're going to learn is ways to increase participation of students with disabilities in STEAM activities that are purposeful and promote access and student agency. One of the really important things that you might learn today as well in the spirit of universal design for learning is, although in some cases we're going to be talking about teaching students with disabilities, when you embed universal design for learning into your teaching, it actually helps everyone. So that's something we also hope that you take away. In addition, we're going to hear user stories of creating universal design for learning and assistive technology tools using Tinkercad and other 3D design programs. When I hear the word assistive technology, I think of something futuristic and robotic and very advanced, but an assistive technology could be something like maybe someone in your family has limited mobility in their hands and they're having trouble using an iPhone, and then you just make a simple adaptation to it in order to make the use of that object more easy for that person. So assistive technologies are quite commonplace as well. Glasses, for example, eyeglasses used to be considered a medical device, and then designers got their hands on them in the 50s and 60s, and they became more of a fashion object. The keyboards that we use, like typewriters, for example, actually began as assistive technologies, but then the general public realized that they were useful in other contexts as well. So when we design for people with disabilities, we're actually also enhancing our own human capacity. We're also going to be thinking about strategies for supporting students with low and high incidence disabilities when 3D designing. That was a lot of words, so we thought that we would break down our agenda today just in 3 quick steps. So step 1, we're going to be hearing a call to action and learning about the framework for why and how you would use Tinkercad or other maker activities for students with disabilities or to design by, with, and for students with disabilities. Step 2, we're going to hear some classroom examples. So we're going to go from theory down to examples straight from the classroom, and Rich and Shar primarily going to be supporting us with that step. Step 3, we're going to try it out ourselves. So you see in this little GIF that I made for step number 3, this is an example of a hockey sled. So I'm going to show you just a few things a few tricks in Tinkercad that I did to make this, and also we'll learn a little bit about the history of the hockey sled. All right, so right now we're going to transition into Shar, who's going to be sharing a quote with us to start thinking about some of these issues.
Great, thank you, Kelly. Could you control the screen so I can see the chat? What I'm going to do is, we have this quote: just as the sidewalk curb cut provides new avenues for our bodies, electronic curb cuts provide new avenues for our minds. What I'd like you to do is open up your chat box and tell me who benefits from a sidewalk curb cut. We'll just take a moment and see what you've got. For example, Mare benefits from a sidewalk curb cut. I benefit from Mare being able to cross the sidewalk to my house. Anybody else maybe under questions? Nope. All right. Well, I don't want to waste any time, so I'll just move on. Chatty group. People who are pushing strollers benefit from sidewalk curb cuts. Kids on bicycles,
Skateboarders.
Yeah, lots of people benefit from sidewalk curb cuts. But an electronic curb cut, any ideas on what we mean by that? No, I'll spare you. The sidewalk curb, the electronic curb cut is basically using assistive technology, using technology and computers to bypass any barriers that are presented to you in life. Who benefits from that? You can name individuals, but we all benefit from that because then we all get to contribute. So that's my 2 cents.
All right, so next we're going to get deep into the theory, so call to action and frameworks.
So a picture of disability in the US today. 1 billion people globally experience disability. 22% in the US live with a disability. 12% are non-institutionalized people of all ages based on data from ACS's 6 questions related to disability. Higher among women, older people, and racial and ethnic minorities.
So when we think about this data, we want to think about how this impacts students with disabilities. And since we are talking about 3D design, this is heavily tied to STEM and STEAM careers. So according to the National Science Foundation, about 25% of undergraduates with disabilities enroll in science engineering fields, and 20% of those are graduate students. When we think about people with disabilities, we're not simply talking about visible disabilities, like those who use wheelchairs and those who might be blind or those who might be deaf or hard of hearing. We're also talking about learning disabilities, diabetes, and other health conditions. Some they may not even be reflected in some of the survey data that Mare shared earlier. And it's also important we think about not only who is going to these programs, but the actual employment of folks with disabilities. So if you look here, you can see that there is a high number of those who are employed. But again, I'm also very curious because you do see that without a disability, it's higher, but it's lower with those with disabilities. But you know, the number is so high that you're wondering, what age range is this? What is this specific disability? I'm actually wondering if there might be some that are more high incidence, like those with learning disabilities. And to think about this, we really have to consider how we're designing our environments, our workplace, education, and even public spaces. So there's a few that I'm going to talk to you about today. The one that we are going to start with is accessibility. When we think about accessibility, it is heavily tied to laws. And when I think about laws, I'm thinking about things like the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990, something that we've all benefited from in this room. Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, IDEA, which is very, very important in education. And this includes details about assistive technology. And this is for people with disabilities to be able to participate in society. When we think about universal design, we're going beyond laws, we're going beyond accessibility. But the catalyst is folks with disabilities being able to participate. So we're proactively designing spaces for them to be able to participate in society by going to restaurants, education, even using products and services. And then we go into universal design for learning, which emerged right around the 90s, whereas universal design was more in the 70s. So with UDL and education, we're very familiar with this term. We're thinking about engagement, we're thinking about how we represent information, and how we give learners the options to express what they know. And this benefits everyone, but again, the catalyst is variable learners, learners with disabilities. We can have great frameworks, we can have great laws, but it's also extremely important to recognize that while we have choice and variability in design, there are very specific needs that some users have. For example, when we think about using a phone, we can certainly lift it up, but if you can actually do what you need to do on the phone more quickly, then you can have something like the little ring key on the back of the phone. Even a sippy cup is a low-tech accommodation that you can make for somebody who may have reduced mobility. So there are a range of assistive technology options out there that 3D printing can actually help with. And to probe a little bit deeper into universal design for learning, it is proactive, it is flexible. It always considers the goal. Why are we doing this? What is it that you want learners to do? If you're asking them to communicate a main idea through writing, well, is writing the goal or is communicating the main idea the goal? And ultimately, it promotes expert learners. This representation that you see on screen is actually a new representation that was released a few weeks back by CAST. And it really does emphasize that expert learning and that engagement is number one. When we think about engagement, we're thinking about why even care about what I'm learning about in the first place. But when we consider the other two, representation and action expression, I feel like there's opportunities there when we think about engaging students with disabilities. For example, as a person who's deaf, I can tell you that if you gave me a video and it didn't have captions, you're failing to represent the material in a way that would be accessible for me. So that's one way you can increase access for me, but also for others. And then when it comes to action expression, if you're expecting people to communicate ideas about something, there's a lot of different ways that can do that. You can write, you can speak, you can dance, you can do all sorts of that stuff. So again, think about the goal and how you want to promote expert learning. So I want to ask you right now and throughout the rest of the evening, how do you proactively plan for variability of learners in your classroom or your learning space? We've created this pattern for you to share ideas and reflections for the rest of the night and beyond. So please take a moment and share. If you go and click on the link, you don't have to create an account. All you have to do is just add your response.
And this is something that you can continue to go back to after the webinar as well, and as you're working on some of the maybe learning artifacts that you're creating as a result of this webinar.
Yes. Now to give you a more specific case study of an iPad that could be both a UDL and AT tool in the context of 3D printing, you can see a couple of images on there. You can see a mount. There's various mount representations on there using PVC pipes, but you can also use some other phone stands. I noticed there's actually one that's right in front of us here, and there's a lot of really cool ways you can use it. Shar was actually sharing with me earlier that if you're an ASL user who's using a phone, you're not going to have a hand that's going to be holding the phone. You want to be hands-free so you can fully express with both hands. And there's also those options for those who might be using communication devices where they may have some trouble with mobility and you want to be able to have them focus on certain areas of the screen. And there's actually something on Thingiverse that has this design of that screen protector or key guard.
So Thingiverse is sort of a key site when you're doing 3D, especially when you're learning it, because there's probably a million things up there. In 2015, a study showed, though, that only 1% or 350 designs on the site were for assistive technology. And of the 70 designers who were represented within those 350 designs, only 13 were people with disabilities designing for themselves. The AT adoption rate is less than a third of AT devices are abandoned because they don't meet the user's needs. And the thought is that it may be because the AT users are not part of the design process. So at Wheelock, what we've done here is we teach teachers, and some of our teachers have disabilities too. But we are teaching our students with disabilities how to design their own products. There's so many times, and and I'm a wheelchair user, I often have people saying, hey, let me design something to make your life easier. And what I usually say is, well, what about teaching me to make my life easier? And this is what we attempt to do with our students. So we actually have one item here, which is, this was designed by Kayla Lemure, who uses a wheelchair and has a service dog. And her dog is trained to be able to press buttons, the door buttons, like the one on the left there, which is actually fairly small and kind of shiny and slippery, and the dog's paws kept slipping off. So her dog couldn't get the door open. So we showed Kayla Tinkercad, which she embraced heartily and just loved using. And so she designed this door button, which is very large, and really fun, and worked for her dog, but it was a bit too large. So she went back, and one of her iterations, she went through several iterations and came down to a smaller one, but it's still highly textured, so her dog could open the door.
So cool.
It is. She's neat. The other thing is, and I always say I'm going to threaten to write a book called Beyond Bunny Rabbits, because, you know, so many people, they encounter a 3D printer and the first thing they want to do is print it. As a matter of fact, I think that is one of the first things that was printed in one of the colleges. Print bunny rabbits, teddy bears, cell phone cases, you know, the common things, because we're not used to thinking in 3 dimensions. I was trained as a sculptor, so it's second nature to me, but most people, they think printing and they think flat paper. So it's hard to get your mind out of that groove. So we've looked for things that are sort of more useful. So this on the left and this here, these are Braille signs that we made because our elevators break a lot. So we could slap these up on the wall quickly saying elevator out of order. And we've done that across campus. We have the box on the right was actually something Kayla designed for her graduation so that she could feed her dog treats from it. And so this was the design that worked best for what she could hold on to. And then if you, oh, no, actually, go back to, sorry. This one is actually a map of the campus, a tactile map. It's very easy to do. There's a site you can go to online. You plug in your coordinates or your address to a Google map, and it exports an STL file that you can send to your printer, and you can print on various different scales and heights, and you know, so it works to give people a tactile representation of a site, whether it's your campus or your house or whatever.
It's really cool.
It is neat stuff.
So one of the big things that we want to think about in design, which Mare absolutely reinforced, is the quote, which is said a lot among activists for disabilities, is nothing about us without us. And you can see these images here are historic images of Americans with Disabilities fighting for their rights before the Americans with Disabilities Act. The people crawling on the steps legitimately had no way to get up other than crawling. So this has made a huge difference. So think about, what does this mean for us as designers? So one of the inspirations for me, and there are many, is the Paralympic athlete and actress Amy Mullins. And she wears prosthetics, I believe, from her knee down on both legs. And she gave this amazing TED Talk where she's talking about her 12 pairs of legs. And one of the things she said, which I thought was amazing, is that someone said to her, it's not fair that you can change your height in significant ways, because she can go from 5'9" to 6 feet tall. And this had nothing to do with heels. This actually had to do with heels mixed with how long her legs were. And she even had custom designed prosthetics for running and for runway walking. So it's really interesting to think about. So this is innovation in design. And this is further exemplified in the book Design Meets Disability, which was authored and published by the MIT Press. And in this TED Talk by Elise Roy, who is also deaf. And she says that disability can and should encourage innovation in design. So what does this mean? And you might be curious out there, so how can I get more people in my companies or my organizations involved in designing things? I suggest you really do start with the design thinking process. Invite people to come, test, and prototype. Don't just simply have a fun maker night. Let's actually bring people through a process. And the design thinking process guides you through 5 steps. I know there's equity-centered frameworks, which also emphasize reflection and being able to notice where your biases are at the beginning. So with the design thinking process as applied to disability, there are a number of amazing examples that are out there that I've curated for you in this playlist. If you click on the image, it'll also be shared with you by our Autodesk organizer. There's a bunch of examples in here of articles that are published by Fast Company. We have TED Talks in here. We have actual links to prototypes created by students with disabilities, by people who make assistive technology for a living. I couldn't possibly go through them all tonight, but I really encourage you to check out examples with sensory tools, with 3D printed switches, with creating prosthetics for your American Girl doll, with a little girl who's shooting out glitter from her prosthetic arm, and with Microsoft's designers who are saying, okay, let's totally rethink how we do design. And I tell you these stories because innovation is happening everywhere, and you can actually make this happen in your classroom. You just simply have to really engage, again, with that design thinking process of empathy. And the truth is, and I have to say this, and I say it all the time, disability is the one group that anybody can join.
Okay, so moving on to classroom examples. So we're going to start with Shar.
Hi. I wanted to start with a little case study here. You're seeing Raphael there, and Raphael has Usher's syndrome. He's deaf, and he has oh, hold on. I have to look at my notes because I never can pronounce it. I know the sign. Retinitis pigmentosus. And what that means is his vision starts to tunnel in on itself until nothing. Already he's experiencing the need for an enlarged cursor, and nowhere was this more evident than when he was using Tinkercad. You see the 2 red boxes up above, and then the white box handle. Is that the technical term, Kellyanne?
That works.
Okay, the handle for resizing and twirling and all that. He couldn't find the cursor on the screen to hit the little target. So what I did was used the display, cursor display in accessibility on the Macintosh and made the cursor bigger. He still had difficulty, but this time because the handle was so small and the cursor was so large. So what we did is, can we go to the next slide? Mm-hmm. Thank you. I turned on zoom for the display, and that magnified everything, which is great. However, his screen then looked different from everybody else in the class. And this is an example of not about us, without us. He didn't want to be different. He had enough challenges in his life with night vision, always freaking out whenever the lights went out, those types of things. He didn't want to be different from his peers. So what I did was I paired him up with a partner, and the 2 of them did this. Isn't it great? The task was to build a house. The criteria had to be 4 walls, a roof, and a door. And this is the house the 2 of them built. You can see it's not perfect. It's authentic work. But considering how much the red blends in with the red, I think it's a work of art. And the boys were very proud of it.
And it speaks to the power of collaboration and you trying all different strategies in order to engage them. And this is great evidence of that.
Yeah, you're right. Wow, I'm smarter than I thought.
You're smarter than all of us.
All right, so then let's talk a little bit about design thinking. I do this with my 5th graders now. I give them a cast of characters. I've used The Simpsons, but I didn't know about copyright. So here's 5 royalty-free images. Astronaut, child with a backpack, grandpa, baby, person in a wheelchair. they had to design a chair. Now, the needs of each of them are different. As you can foresee, the needs of the baby versus the astronaut are astronomical. Go ahead and flip the page. Take a look at Grandpa's chair. The first, they came up with the blue chair. They just used clip art to come up with solutions. Then someone else found a chair with a lift and decided that would be better for Grandpa. First iteration for the kid with the backpack, Billy, has just a standard chair. But when I talked to them about how heavy the backpack was, someone said, if I had a hook on the back that I could put the backpack on, that would be better. The astronaut is completely unfeasible. He's not safe. He's not strapped in. He's going to float off into space. But it was a good first attempt. And as for the wheelchair user, she already had a chair. Helen wanted to trick it out. And so they did. All right. So I think that's my pieces. I'll turn it back over to you, Kellyanne.
Yeah, I think that that's really a great simple way to start teaching about design thinking, either to like kids or adults, is beginning with the user and building empathy for the user and researching the user's needs and then building out from there, which is also could then be applied to using Tinkercad as well as making the chair in 3D. So that's super cool. Thank you, Shar. All right, next is Rich.
Great, thanks, Kellyanne. So for the past 5 years, I and my colleagues at Brookwood School in Manchester, we're about an hour north of Boston, we've been exploring the intersection between STEAM, design, assistive technology, empathy, and of course 3D printing. In 2013, I saw a YouTube video that essentially changed my life. It was a video of one of the first 3D printable prosthetics. And when I saw that, I thought, oh, that might make an amazing project for some students. My son Max was born with a condition called brachydactyly, which prevented the fingers on his right hand from developing. So during the 2013-14 school year, I worked with some students over a course of 6 months. We created a functional prosthetic device for Max using 3D printed parts. When we brought Max in to try it and it worked, and Max said, hey, it works. And my student said, hey, it works. And I said, oh my God, it works. And we realized that we had stumbled on to something that here's a technology that not only allows the education process to unfold, but it actually allows students to create highly effective, professional final products as well. So next slide. So that forced us or sent us into the world of 3D printed prosthetics. Up on the screen here, you can see a spectrum of the devices that my students made for Max. You can see a Spider-Man hand and a Batman hand and a Incredible Hulk hand. You might see a theme developing here. And through this work, I became affiliated with a couple of really interesting organizations. Enable is an online open source community of over 10,000 designers and physicians and parents and artists, all working to create 3D printed prosthetics and 3D printable prosthetics. I became their education coordinator and worked with hundreds of schools looking to bring this work to their school. And if you click to the next slide, another group that grew out of Enable was the Enable Community Foundation. They're seeking to meet the global need for cheap, customized prosthetics. And those are, I showed those two slides both because they're part of the work that I've been doing, but also because these are incredible resources for any teachers that are looking to bring meaningful learning experiences to their students. While working with Enable, I created a curriculum, and you can see there's the link there. It is just a curriculum for bringing 3D printed prosthetics and broader bringing 3D printed assistive devices to the classroom. Any of the viewers of the webinar are more than welcome to access any of the curriculum, or also contact me if you would like to be assisted through or walk through any parts of the curriculum. So that I would offer that to you as well. Interestingly, in the last year or so, we've been moving past the mechanical articulated hands of Enable, and we've been moving more towards what we call hyper-customized devices. And you can see Max proudly wearing his device there. What we've actually decided to do is to start honoring the hand that Max was born with. And on the left side of the screen there, you can see an actual scan, a digital scan of his hand. We took a plaster cast of his hand, and then we had the fine folks at Roboto in New York City. They did a high-resolution scan of it. And we can then actually import that scan into Tinkercad, and then we can actually, I and the students can actually work with it. So we have a little video in the next slide. I thought I would include this just so you can actually see the process of how we go from a plaster cast of Max's hand to a 3D printable customized device. So there's the scan of Max's hand. Just imported it. You can actually import other STL files into Tinkercad and manipulate them. So we just took the actual hand file, and we made a hole in the device, the exact shape of Max's hand. You can see on the outside, it's actually his hand shape that we've used to create the device. Interestingly, we've realized that students can play a really important role in here. They can actually start designing the clips there. So there you see a little drumstick clip. We have students beginning to design all sorts of clips. We have our kids take a look at our PE department through Max's eyes, and what sorts of activities would he have a tough time participating in. We have them take a look at our music program and ask what sort of problems, what sort of issues would Max run into if he was actually trying to participate in our music department. This was a really expensive and powerful scanning device that they used there, but in fact now there are really cheap scanning devices. We just have an app called Clone installed in our iPads, and you can actually do fairly high quality scans using Clone. So that's also something that we've begun to do some work with. Great. Once we realized that we could actually get our students to start doing some of the designing of the attachment parts of the hand, we realized that we were in some really exciting terrain, that we could actually start having our students do all sorts of those authentic design tasks. So about 3 years ago, we created something called the Brookwood Problem Bank. And essentially this started as a Weebly website where anybody in our school could submit a problem in need of a 3D design solution, and then we could turn that over to the students. And we found that there was limitless problems in our community that made excellent authentic design challenges for our students. And so for the last 3 years, we've been having students do that kind of authentic design, but we've actually also been helping other schools do that exact work. If you were to click on the problem bank, you'll see some information on how to create a problem bank, but if any schools want to set that up and crowdsource the problems in your community to students and give them those design opportunities, that would be, you can certainly contact me. Next slide, please. So 2 years ago, we realized that that idea was too good just to keep within our school. So we decided that we would actually have our students make partnerships with folks out in our community. We made a collaboration with the Harbor Light Community Partners Association on the North Shore. That's an affordable housing organization. And our students started to work with seniors. And some of the things my colleagues were saying about not designing for somebody, but designing with them and designing by them. We are actually working with seniors to find issues in their lives and in their community where a possible 3D printed assistive device might help. The seniors play a critical role in this. They help the students find the authentic problems. They give the students feedback on the designs. They actually do some of the prototyping with Play-Doh. In fact, today at our school, we had 12 seniors come and visit, working with 50 sixth graders to see that whole group using Play-Doh. And in fact, we actually also had the sixth graders teach the seniors how to use Tinkercad. So really seeking not just to empower our kids in terms of design, but also empowering the seniors as well. So next slide, please. So we've made a commitment to this work at Brookwood using 3D designing techniques and Tinkercad to empower our kids of all ages. And so what you see there is this is a project that we're doing with first grade. Sarah Daub, who is our first grade teacher, has been collaborating with me, and together we have our students not only learning how to create 3D printed nameplates, but we had them all make Braille nameplates as well using an online Braille translator. And then we actually had our students last week do a full needs assessment of our school. So they walked around the school and they saw where did actually Braille occur and why was it in some places and not other places. And then they began to ask the questions, well, why is it not in this place? And so with Tinkercad and with the online Braille translator that I think I'll provide a link in the actual resources, we can actually have first graders creating actual Braille plates that we can put up on the wall and have our students play a critical role in helping to make our school more accessible. So, so we have absolutely embraced the use of, I often tell people that Tinkercad changed my life. We're using it as this wedge, not necessarily just to make it all about 3D printing, but we use it as a wedge to show that it's possible for students to find problems in their lives, in their communities, and in their world. And kids can actually create very sophisticated solutions. And hopefully when they have some experience with that what we call change making, then they can take those same skills and mindsets and apply them to other areas of their life and solve problems for themselves and others in all types of facets of their lives.
So cool.
Yeah,
I love the way that Rich engages not just his own students, but just the community as well, and community-based learning, and just how it seems as though his students are really thinking about how to make the world a better place. So super cool. So getting back to the world of teacher, if you are here, and hopefully you're still enjoying yourself participating in this webinar, but we also wanted to make this useful for you in terms of your professional development and documenting your professional development. Many of you have to present artifacts of your learning to your evaluators, so we thought that we could come up with some ways for you to make your learning visible as a result of participating in this webinar. So here are some ideas. So one idea that we had was that you could do a problem finding project, kind of similar to what Rich does with his students, that engages students in the design of an assistive technology. We will be sending you that email with all those goodies in it, including the certificate I'm about to show you and other resources that will be able to help you in this. So Rich has some cool videos that we're going to share that really kind of shows you a day in the life of some of the projects that he does. Another idea that we had is that you could create a Tinkercad lesson plan that uses universal design for learning principles to adapt for diverse learners. We've also created a template to help you with that, and if that's useful for you, maybe that's something that you could include as an artifact. We also just want to remind you about Rhiannon's Padlet that she created, and there's the URL for that at the bottom, so that autode.sk/Padlet. So that's a place for you to maybe connect with others who are participating in this webinar. Maybe you can collaborate on an artifact together through the Padlet. So those are some resources for you. Another thing that we want to announce to you is in your email that you'll be receiving in about a week, you will be getting a certificate that honors the time that you spent with us during this webinar and the learning that you did. We do hope that you also complete the additional hour of professional development that's listed on the certificate, and that just means take what you learned today and turn it into something that's cool. So it could be a lesson plan, it could be a reflection, it could be a unit plan or something else, but do make sure that if you're using this certificate that you have actually done the follow-up work as well. It would make a nice cover maybe to your artifacts. I also just wanted to give a shout out to the Boston Public Schools who endorsed this webinar series as an appropriate means of professional development for its teachers. So teachers in Boston are now earning PDPs for the renewal of their teacher licenses as a result of participating. So just wanted to shout out there. So next step is try it out yourself. So one thing that you might do right now, or you could just sit back and watch and maybe wait for the recording to be emailed to you. But if you're getting antsy and you want to get active, go to Tinkercad. So www.tinkercad.com. If you search the gallery, if you search the word hockey sled, you'll be able to find my design that I'm going to show you. So hockey sled, it should come up pretty quickly, and that's public in the gallery. So hockey sleds, why I was thinking about sled hockey. One, it's the 2 weeks of the Olympics, so it's Olympic season. Sled hockey is definitely on a lot of people's minds right now. But I also found sled hockey to be a really good example of this theme of objects that were designed as assistive technologies by people who are actually impacted personally by the disabilities. So hockey sled was actually invented by two athletes with disabilities in Sweden who were in a hospital together, and they had enjoyed playing hockey before they were injured, but they wanted to be able to continue to play hockey after the fact, so they didn't let it stop them. In the spirit of the maker movement, they actually cobbled together some things to build the first hockey sled. So they had two skates that they put on it. They had somehow, I think, soldered it to a metal frame. For the sticks, they used bicycle handles, and they were able to not let their disabilities limit them from playing the sport that they loved. So I just thought that was a cool story. And it's also kind of a cool object to try to create. So really quickly, in Rich's video that he shows you importing an STL into Tinkercad. And I wanted to show you how you begin that process, or you could begin this process through importing a vector file, so an SVG file. So this is how I begin. So if I'm thinking about, so for example, when I was making my hockey sled, I used a lot of the Tinkercad shapes to make a lot of the aspects of it, but there are certain things like the skates I just couldn't figure out how to make. So I thought, well, maybe I can find a nice clean SVG file of an ice skate and kind of work from there. So what you see me doing is I'm in Google Images. I found an image that I liked. Even if it is an SVG, it won't let you download it as an SVG. It's a PNG file. You can't import PNG files into Tinkercad. They need to be converted into SVGs. So I oftentimes use this site that you see here, which is Online Convert. It's free. You got to avoid the advertisements, but I find it to be a pretty reliable site for making SVGs. And as you can see here through this process, I have created my SVG, and now I'm ready to import it into Tinkercad. So I clicked Import. Make sure that you have the SVG file when you're importing it, because if you accidentally do the PNG, it'll reject it. So there's my SVG of my skate. When I go to import things, if it's an SVG, I always scale it down to 10, because otherwise it's super huge. So you just saw me go from 100 to 10, and there we are. So there's the skate. But I don't need the whole skate. I just need the blade. So you see me here, I'm lifting it up using that handle, that little triangle at the top to lift it. I'm hitting Shift as I scale it down so I don't lose my proportions of my skate. And now what you see me doing here is dragging out a block, but it's a hole. And I'm using that to actually subtract from the shape in order to just use the blade. So you can see me there. I'm zooming out so I can actually see the whole thing. I'm tilting it a little bit because the skate's kind of at an angle. And when I'm ready, I'm going to select the skate and the block using the right button. And then there you have it. So I've grouped them both together. So when you saw me up at the top there hitting that icon, that was the group icon. So I selected both shapes, both the ice skate and the cube that I used that was a hole, and then you have your blade. So in this next step, you're going to see me, so here's my hockey sled, and you're going to see me actually adding the skate later on, that STL file. But also I'm going to add another SVG, because in designing my hockey sled, I was thinking, you know, I've never been in one before, but I was thinking I'd want my seat to be comfy. So what could I use to include a comfy seat? So I thought about a bicycle seat. So I went through the same process as you saw before. I found a free copyright image that I wasn't stealing someone's design. So this was up there as free to use. So there's my bicycle seat. You see I scaled it down to 10 again, so it doesn't come in super huge. It's still kind of huge. So I'm pulling it out. I'm just dragging it by using actually the arrow buttons. And then I'm just looking at it, because you can see when you import an SVG, it doesn't come in totally flat. But you can extrude it even further and make it bigger if you want. I'm just rotating it here to 180 because that's where I want it to be. And you can see how you can teach math about angles and dimensions and using Tinkercad. I'm lifting it with the arrow there, and then I'm just dragging it over again using the arrows. There is a fancy way of centering things. I'm just eyeballing it here, but you could actually align it. Here I'm going to make it a little bit smaller so that it fits. And again, I'm holding down the Shift key as I do it so that I don't mess with the dimensions. Lifting it up here. I'm moving it back with the arrows. I actually thought it looked a little fancy to have it hanging out in the back. It made it look kind of like a sports car to me in the back. So aesthetically, that was pleasing to me. So, and for me, that just looks a little bit more comfy. And as I was designing, I was actually kind of in an empathy mode of thinking about if this were the way that I needed to play hockey, you know, I'd want it to look cool. I'd want it to be comfy. And then I think I'm dipping it back too a little bit. I changed the rotation on there. So here it's looking pretty good to me right now. I think I dipped it back a little bit. And then what you'll see me do next, once I'm happy with it, is I am going to keep that seat selected. You can see that blue outline that shows that it's selected. But then I'm going to hit the shift key, or the shift key, or you hit the right button on your mouse so that I can select both of those things. So I'm going to select the sled next. And the reason why I'm selecting them both is I want to group them together. So you can see them grouping, and now those stay together as the same shape. The next step is what I need next is the blades. So I'm going to go back and get that blade from my earlier file. So I'm choosing the file, and I'm going to import it as an STL this time, like the way that you saw Rich do it with his son's hand, the scan of his hand. So I'm importing the blade, and it's still a little bit big, so I'm dragging it out. And I'm just doing that with using the arrows. I'm hitting shift as I make it smaller. And then I'm moving it using the arrows. I could move it faster if I changed the snap, but I'm trying to be a little bit precise here. So you can see I'm almost there. And then I might want to zoom in to inspect it to make sure that it actually all connects. This is not the most practical way of actually making a hockey sled, but you can make a little prototype and 3D print it. So I'm seeing here that it's not necessarily totally connected. So I'm going to lift it just a little bit using that arrow there. And then when I'm happy with it, I realize that I actually need two. So I'm going to smart duplicate the blade. So to do that, depending on the device that you're on, it's either Command D or Control D. And then it just pops out a new one that looks exactly the same. If it's at an angle, it'll be at the same angle as well. It's usually in the same location, which is nice, so I don't have to worry about it being lined up. And it's looking pretty good. So I'm going to select, so that one, the right blade is already selected. I'm going to next select the left blade. And then I'm going to select that little piece at the top and make it, group it together and make it all one component. Take a look. I think it's annoying me that it's a different color. So then I'm going to group it with the rest of the metal frame. I like making things white when they're supposed to be shiny because I think it has a cool aesthetic effect. Oops, and I didn't like that color, so I'm going to change it to dark gray. So there you have it. So that's an example of how I made some parts of the hockey sled and just how you can be creative in terms of mixing, you know, both your original designs and then also importing SVGs. All right, so if you found that interesting and you're interested in thinking about how can I make sports more accessible, I feel like that's like a great topic for us to be thinking about. You might be interested in a project that we've been working on with the Boston Bruins. You do not need to be necessarily a Bruins fan in order to join Boston Bruins Academy, the curriculum, but here's a link, and we've created 3 really cool Tinkercad lessons that integrate Common Core subjects with the 3D design. And I would really love for people to, because this isn't a curriculum that's evolving, for people to start thinking about what are some other lessons that we can teach, maybe even to make this sport of hockey more accessible. In the spirit of accessibility, but also inclusion and diversity, we are super excited about a new project that some members of our Tinkercad team, Erica, for example, is doing in collaborating with some people from the Black Panther movie that's coming out this weekend. So she's created 3 really cool movies in collaboration with a group in Roxbury, Massachusetts, in making designs that are like, for example, it's Queen Ramonda, right? Yes, mm-hmm. Queen Ramonda's crown. You can make it in Tinkercad. And also they're meant for teachers. So teachers can share these videos with their students and do these projects with students as well. They've created Instructable, so there's some links to this. So there's other objects besides the crown. The crown is the first one. And there's also a YouTube series that's sponsored by Autodesk. So we hope that you check that out as well. So at this point in time, we're happy that you've stuck around. We're here to answer any questions. I see some pretty compelling ones coming up already in the chat screen. Ways to stay connected with us. So if you have questions that aren't specifically about this webinar, you could ask them at the Tinkercad forum, the Tinkercad Help Center. These are all linked to the slideshow that you'll be receiving. Tinkercad has a Facebook page, and that's at Tinkercad. Our handle at Twitter is also at Tinkercad. We do have Instagram at Tinkercad and Pinterest as well. We know teachers like to find inspiration in Pinterest too. So these are all the different ways that you can stay connected, in addition to the Padlet that Rhianon created as well. So at this point, Kayla, who is helping us on Team Tinkercad out in San Francisco and answering your questions throughout the show, has also been curating some that she thinks would be interesting for the panel to ask. So I'm wondering, Kayla, do you have any questions for us?
Yes, I do. So I have one here. I work in a library on a military base. We have patrons on base who have disabilities, some on the autism spectrum, ADHD, and some unknown. What do you suggest is a good way to try and get them to learn about STEM? Is there a specific way we should be doing this other than our normal marketing, which targets everyone?
Well, I think targeting everyone is the way to go. You know, it's an opportunity to engage your community and get suggestions from them with what they would like to see. I was in doing some of the research on, you know, devices that don't exist. One of the things that came up was Fitbits. You know, it's very popular, all of these devices to, you know, tell you how many steps you've walked and all of that. Well, that wouldn't work for me because I'm on wheels. So, you know, when you engage your community, you find these things that you might never have thought of, and it gives you a place to start, and then you can engage them in learning how to make their own solutions.
I've also found in teaching students with autism and integrating technology in general is that oftentimes a lot of my students with autism, particularly students who are very creative or very interested in technology, it was actually a good way for them to be able to show off something that they're really good at, but also because Tinkercad has the collaboration feature as well, it's a great way to then kind of teach those social skills that are oftentimes really important for students with autism. So maybe they know something that's super cool that they're able to do in Tinkercad, but they're collaborating with someone else through the process. So they're learning social skills while maybe another student is learning some sort of technical thing from them.
All right, great. We do have a question, actually, I guess, for Mare. There's been a lot of conversations around your 3D printed AT solution, and so people were wondering if there was a website that you could share to download the maps. There
is, and I think I actually, it should be in the documentation somewhere. I sent that along. Off the top of my head, I don't remember what it's called, but it's very accessible.
Yep, and we'll have it in the resources that we send out in the email next week.
Yeah. Yes, so I believe I may have linked to this in my interactive slide deck. So one of the links that was shared was a screen of various objects, and in there you will find a link to tactile maps, and you can input the address, and then it gives you the file that they can create for you that you can create yourself.
Yeah.
So that's available on the paste slide deck.
Any other questions?
We do have some question about importing files and just general importing. Maybe we can, if we could do a real demo or just describe importing files. A lot of people have questions around that.
Which type of files?
STLs specifically.
It's just, let me see if I can get the screen going for that. Oops. So that's actually Rhianon's, the little site that she made. So you'll have access to that. All right, so I'm going into Tinkercad right now. How am I not already signed in? I'm always on Tinkercad. Luckily, my password is there. So to import, it's pretty simple. It's the same process that you would use to import like an SVG or any other type of file. One thing that I love teaching students about teaching with technology is that one of the greatest skills that you learn in teaching technology is patience, because sometimes technology is not always helpful for us as we are continuing to sign in. My kids would say, the internet's not working. And I would say, yes, it is. It's just not working here. It's working hard somewhere else. It's also a great opportunity to teach the word ephemeral, the vocabulary word. It's like you don't appreciate it until it's not there. For some reason, I'm not signing in. Oh, maybe it didn't like my password. Now it's signing in. That was my fault. It wasn't the internet's fault. I'm sorry, internet. You always have to apologize for the internet.
You do.
She's very
apologize to the
temperamental.
webpage.
Yeah. Right. You never know. All right, so to import an STL, I'm just opening up a new design. Okay, so I just do import, choose a file. I'm just gonna search STL. So you choose STL, my skate's coming up there. And then I just hit choose. I'm not gonna scale it down for this one. Import, and there it is. So that's how you import. Other questions? Did that answer the question?
Yes, that does answer the question. I think we just had a nice comment in here about that someone here is a Project Lead the Way teacher, and the new design and modeling curriculum for middle school focuses a lot on designing orthotics for students with disabilities. So just commenting, you know, if anyone else is Project Lead the Way. It's a good connection right now. And then just a lot of people thanking everyone. Oh, yes. Rich, go ahead.
I'm certainly very familiar with Project Lead the Way. We work with a lot of schools that have implemented successful curricula through Project Lead the Way. I know that they've actually started to do a lot more design and 3D printing, and so I think the work that we're talking about just provides that extra purpose for the work that students are doing.
Terrific. Yep, that's, I think, it. Thank you.
That's it. All right, well, we just want to thank everybody for sticking around. We know we went a little long, but we appreciate everybody who hung in there. And we hope that you check out our next episode of Tinkercad Teachers. We're really excited to keep this going. And I just would like to thank our awesome guests again. And this is cheering and silent. So we're going to end in ASL. All right, thank you guys. Goodbye.